You are looking at the most dangerous woman in the world. Welcome back. Time to look at the most evil, feared, and dangerous women on the planet. From a Russian grandmother who was exposed as a serial killer, to a scary woman who freaked out in court after getting a life sentence. First, we have to look at the White Widow. This is Samantha Lewthwaite. For much of her life, she was a normal British girl. But this all changed when she met Jermaine Lindsay. After marrying Jermaine Lindsay, Samantha changed her religion. She also changed everything about her life and became cut off from her family. But in 2005, Samantha's husband Jermaine did the unthinkable. He carried out one of the worst attacks of all time. This was the London bombings. 56 people lost their lives and over 700 were injured. This was after bombs exploded on many trains and buses. At first, Samantha talked to the media and said she knew nothing about this. She claimed to be shocked by what her husband had done, but it was later found this was all an act. Samantha had been instrumental in planning this attack, but before she could be arrested, she fled to Kenya with a fake passport. Since then, she's been known by the nickname the White Widow. She is wanted by Interpol, the CIA, MI6, and MI5. But to this day, she's still a fugitive on the run. Over the years, she's been behind many big attacks all over the world. This includes grenade attacks at many places of worship, an attack on a bar in Kenya in 2012, and an attack on a shopping mall also in Kenya. She's been known to fund and plan attacks all over the world. She's a member of the radical militant group Al-Shabaab. The group is based in Somalia, where it's believed Samantha lives today. The weird thing is, she had a normal upbringing. She was raised in a Christian house in the UK, but somehow took a dark path and is now one of the most wanted women in the world. Moving on, we have to look at Eileen Wuornos. This lady may look like an innocent woman, but in the 1970s, she took 7 people's lives. She got away with this for a long time because back then no one thought a woman could be a serial killer. She would take these men's lives with a firearm and then get rid of their bodies in Florida swamps. She would also steal their belongings and sell them in pawn shops, which is eventually how she was caught thanks to fingerprints. Eileen's crimes were so evil she was sentenced to capital punishment. Eileen had had a crazy life. Her father had gone to prison for terrible crimes, and inside had taken his own life. On the outside world, Eileen got involved in narcotics, and she became pregnant at the age of only 14. She then became an armed robber, but after some time, it seems this woman simply snapped. That was when she began to take many men's lives. Eileen said that she did all of this in self-defense, but she was found guilty for taking the 7 lives, and in 2002 was taken out by a lethal injection. To this day, she is said to be one of the scariest women to ever live. Now we have to look at Tamara Samsonova. This woman from Russia looks like an innocent old grandmother, and that's exactly why she got away with her crimes for so long. She is known as the Granny Ripper. Over 15 years, she took over 13 lives. She is currently 75 years old. For a long time, she was married, but in 2000, her husband mysteriously disappeared. It's now believed that she took her husband's life. After her husband disappeared, Tamara began renting out a room in her apartment. But each time a new tenant came to her apartment, they would go missing. It turned out Tamara had been poisoning all of these men. Men would rent the room at the apartment only to be poisoned by Tamara. She also took various women's lives as well. Tamara would get rid of her victims' bodies in a very obvious way. She would simply throw the parts in nearby ponds and roads. One day, a body part of one of her victims was found near her apartment. Police then searched every single apartment in her building, and when they went into her bathroom, they found blood. They immediately arrested Tamara and did a forensic analysis. This linked her to more than 13 murders. Inside her apartment, police also found her diary. On one of the pages, she had written, "I killed my tenant Volodya, cut him to pieces in the bathroom with a knife, and then put the pieces of his body into plastic bags and threw them away." It's creepy to think such an innocent-looking woman would be so evil. She also admitted that she cut the head off one of her victims, and then boiled it in a saucepan. Surveillance footage even caught her with the exact saucepan she did this with. Next, we have to look at Diana Lovejoy. This woman from San Diego was arrested after trying to take the life of her husband. Diana and her boyfriend conspired to take the life of her husband husband, Greg. They were in the middle of a divorce which clearly got very ugly. Thankfully, Greg survived an attempt on his life. But Diana was sentenced to 26 years to life in prison. But when this guilty verdict was read out, she was clearly shocked.
Alright, we're going to need to take a break.
Diana literally fainted from hearing this. But really, what did she expect for plotting to take the life of her own husband? Moving on, we have to look at Irina Gardamarchuk. Irina Gardamarchuk is known as Russia's worst ever female serial killer. Over 10 years, this evil woman took so many lives. And her being a woman actually helped her a lot. She escaped police for so long because they were convinced the person responsible for these deaths was a man. They never expected it would be this woman who was married with 2 kids. But Irina would take many elderly people's lives, and then steal all of their possessions. She is known as the Monster of Krasnofinsk. She began her evil spree when she helped an elderly woman with shopping bags cross the road. She was invited back to the elderly woman's apartment, but that's when she whacked the old woman with a vase and stole $20. After this, Irina became addicted to taking lives. She would walk around the streets with a hammer in her handbag, taking the lives of 17 people. She was only caught in 2010 when one of her victims survived. Irina was immediately arrested and was sentenced to 20 years in prison where she remains today. Moving on, let's look at Karla Homolka. In 1993, this woman helped her husband take 2 women's lives, one of those women being Karla's very own sister. But a scary truth was later revealed. The 2 women were only the tip of the iceberg. It turned out Karla had been helping her serial killer husband, Paul Bernardo, for many years. Paul Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison, and Karla Homolka was sentenced to 12 years in prison for her role in these killings. Some say she got off way too light. Finally, we have to look at Mayuki Ishikawa. Did you know that one of the worst serial killers of all time was a woman? Mayuki from Japan actually took the 4th most lives out of any serial killer ever. She was a midwife who worked at a hospital, but while working at the hospital she took many babies' lives. In total, she took 211 lives. But bizarrely, she was only sentenced to 4 years in prison. Japan is famous for being very light on killers. She has been called the most evil woman in history. Mayuki passed away in 1987, aged 90, and at the time, she was a free woman. Now it's time to make your voice heard. Comment below which of these women was the scariest.